Lock the doors, turn out the lights, and climb into bed. It's time for Hillbilly Dead Time Stories.
Cemeteries can bring about a variety of emotions in people. Some like to make a day of visiting a beautifully landscaped cemetery such as Laurel Hill in Philadelphia. Such beautiful surroundings can bring peace to you regardless of why that setting exists. The lush gardens and splendid architecture, mausoleums and headstones can make it easy to block out the fact that you are surrounded by dead bodies. For others, wandering around a cemetery can bring about the feelings of sorrow from the loss of someone close. You like to think that your loved one's final resting place will bring them the eternal peace that they deserve. Unfortunately, some cemeteries have a horribly hidden past that will definitely not let its residents rest in peace. If you ever want to see a side-by-side example of a cemetery that you would be honored to have your family buried in as opposed to one that would give you nightmares to have a loved one spend an eternity, look no further than Cave Hill Cemetery and Eastern Cemetery in Louisville, Kentucky. Cave Hill Cemetery is the final resting place of various military heroes as well as noted public figures such as Colonel Harlan Sanders from Kentucky Fried Chicken fame, famous explorer George Rogers Clark, and one of the most popular athletes of all time, Muhammad Ali. Cave Hill is a popular tourist attraction and a Louisville treasure. Many assume that the small cemetery next to Cave Hill is simply part of it because it's so close, but in fact, Eastern Cemetery has been abandoned for decades and has quite the troubled past. Eastern Cemetery sits on 28 acres and is one of Louisville's oldest cemeteries, being established in the 1840s. The past wasn't always troubled. In fact, the cemetery gained notoriety for being one of the first in America to allow people from different races and ethnicities on the same property. This was unheard of at the time. Eastern Cemetery is a resting place to people from various backgrounds, such as ministers from different religions, Union and Confederate soldiers, slaves, Freemasons, and veterans from all of the major wars. This cemetery was also in the forefront of technology in the 1930s, bringing the city's first crematoriums. Things would eventually take a drastic turn for the worse. Anthropologists have found that bodies were actually being buried in graves that were already occupied by corpses. That meant that a family plot, for example, would disturbingly be used multiple times. There have been 4 different grave maps of Eastern Cemetery. They were issued in 1880, 1907, 1962, and 1984. All of these maps are completely different from each other. This is further evidence that the plots were resold and reused for multiple burials. This is not the end of what would be horrifying enough news for the families with loved ones interred here. The New York Times released an article in 1989 that revealed another disturbing fact about Eastern Cemetery. Headstones and even bodies were being moved without informing the loved ones of the deceased. That meant that the headstones and the bodies are mismatched, making it near impossible for a family to know whether a deceased family member is actually buried. More disturbing news also came from this New York Times article. Approximately 70 infants were found buried over top of other people's remains. Most were only buried 10 to 18 inches below the surface. Friends of the Eastern Cemetery, a nonprofit organization of volunteers, are working to heal this cemetery with such a checkered past. They pick up the trash, maintain the landscape, and are repairing headstones. So just how many people are actually buried at Eastern Cemetery? The capacity was set for 18,000, but many believe that the actual number is closer to 51,000.
Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Or daddy has to fight off a zombie herd. And once that zombie herd is dead, daddy has to hack off the devil's head. And if that devil's head gets hacked, daddy has to hunt down a werewolf pack. And when that werewolf pack goes down, daddy has to slaughter an evil clown. And after the evil clown is killed, daddy has to take on a vampire